Daniel's breath came fast as two large alien guards grabbed his arms and dragged him through the wide metallic corridor. His boots scraped the floor, the cold metal ringing with every step. He tried to pull away, but their grip was like iron. The bright lights overhead made his eyes ache. He could hear whispers from other workers as he was pulled along, their voices sharp with gossip and shock. Some looked at him with pity, others with hate. No one stepped forward to help. The guards pushed open a heavy black door, and he was thrown into a grand chamber. The walls were carved with strange alien symbols, glowing faintly. The air smelled faintly of spice and metal. At the far end stood his boss, tall, scaled, with deep silver eyes that could freeze a man in place. And next to him stood a young alien woman with shimmering blue skin and long silver hair, her dress slightly crooked, eyes wide as if she had been caught in the middle of something. Daniel knew her face, Lyra, the boss's only daughter. The boss's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You dare dishonor my family, human?" His words were deep and slow, filled with dangerous calm. Daniel's mouth went dry. "Sir, I don't know what." But the boss raised a clawed hand, silencing him instantly. Around the edges of the room, more aliens had gathered, their eyes glowing with judgment. Lyra did not speak. She didn't even look at her father. Her gaze was fixed on Daniel, not with anger, but with something he couldn't read. Fear? Curiosity? Pity? He couldn't tell. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, knuckles pale. The boss stepped forward, his towering frame making Daniel feel small. "My guards caught you with her, in my private quarters. What excuse do you have?" Daniel's heart pounded. This is a misunderstanding. I've never even been near your quarters until now." "Someone," his words were drowned out by a murmur of disbelief from the crowd. The boss's long tail flicked across the floor, a sign of building anger. "Our laws are clear. Any being who violates the honor of my family faces execution by dawn." The words hung heavy in the room. Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. He looked at Lyra, hoping she would speak up, tell them the truth. But she said nothing, her lips pressed tight. For a moment, her eyes flicked to the side, toward the guards at the door, and Daniel noticed the smallest shake of her head. It was so quick he almost thought he imagined it. The boss's voice dropped lower, colder. "If you have nothing to prove your innocence, then your life ends before the first sun rises." Daniel's chest felt tight. The crowd watched like predators waiting for a kill. He wanted to shout, to demand proof, to call out the absurdity of it all. But the weight of alien law was crushing. Whispers filled the chamber. "A human daring such shame. He thinks he's above our traditions. The boss will make an example of him." Daniel could feel every stare burning into his skin. The guard stepped closer, ready to take him away. He took a step forward despite the fear knotting his stomach. "I swear to you, I didn't do this. Someone set me up." His voice shook, but he forced himself to meet the boss's eyes. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of doubt there, but it was gone in an instant. Lyra finally moved. She stepped closer to her father, her voice soft but clear. "Father, perhaps we should not rush." The crowd went silent. Her father turned to her slowly. "You would defend him?" She shook her head lightly. "I only say, sometimes things are not what they seem." Daniel felt a spark of hope, but it was short-lived. The boss's expression hardened again. "Then let him prove it before dawn. If he cannot, the law will have its way." He gestured to the guards. "Take him to the holding cell." As the guards grabbed his arms again, Daniel's mind raced. Before dawn, less than one rotation away. No human could survive in alien prison conditions for long, let alone prove innocence without help. As he was pulled toward the door, his eyes met Lyra's one last time. This time, there was no mistaking it. Her look was deliberate, and there was something in it. Not guilt, not apology, a message. But he didn't know what it meant. The door slammed shut behind him, cutting off the light of the chamber. The cold corridor stretched ahead, and every step toward the holding cell felt heavier. He could still hear the whispers of the crowd in his ears, mixing with the echo of his boss's threat. His fate had been sealed, unless he could find the truth hidden somewhere in this web of silence. And in that moment, as the guards dragged him deeper into the shadows, Daniel realized one thing. Someone wanted him dead, and this accusation was only the beginning. The cell was dark and smelled of damp metal. The walls were smooth and cold, and the only light came from a faint blue strip near the floor. Daniel sat on the hard bench, his hands gripping the edge, mind running in circles. Every sound in the distance made him tense. Somewhere above, a slow dripping noise echoed through the air. He had no idea how long he had been sitting there, but the weight of the alien boss's words kept pressing on him. Execution by dawn. He heard the heavy lock click and the door slid open with a hiss. His muscles tensed, expecting guards or maybe a violent alien prisoner. But instead, it was her, Lyra. She stepped inside quietly, the door sliding shut behind her. The dim light caught the silver in her hair, making her look almost ghostly. Daniel stood slowly, confused and cautious. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low. Lyra glanced toward the door, as if making sure no one was listening. "You need to play along," she said in a hushed tone, her eyes sharp. "If you don't, they will kill you before sunrise." Daniel stared at her, anger and confusion mixing inside him. "Play along with what? You set me up. Why should I trust you?" She didn't flinch at his accusation, but her lips pressed into a thin line. "I didn't set you up," she said, "but I had to use you. It was the only way to make this happen." His fists clenched. "Make what happen?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping even lower. "Not here. It's not safe to explain. All you need to know is this. Your life is in danger, and it's not because of me." She reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out a small crystal chip, no bigger than a coin. She pressed it into his hand. "Hide this. Do not let anyone see it. When you are alone, use your scanner." Daniel looked down at the chip, then back at her face. "What is it?" Her eyes flicked toward the door again. "The truth." Before he could ask more, she turned toward the door. "Remember," she said, "don't trust anyone, not even your own people." That made him pause. "What are you talking about? Why wouldn't I trust them?" But she didn't answer. The door slid open and she slipped out like a shadow. The lock clicked again, leaving him alone with the chip in his palm. He sat back down on the bench, his heart racing. Slowly, he pulled the small scanner from the inner pocket of his uniform. It was standard issue for human workers in alien facilities, mostly used for checking cargo. He inserted the chip carefully, and the screen lit up with strange alien symbols. The translator took a moment before the images started to appear. At first, he saw shipping logs, dates, cargo IDs, and strange markings. But then his breath caught. The next images were of weapons, huge rail cannons, plasma launchers, and armored ships, enough firepower to destroy entire colonies. Then came star maps with plotted attack routes, military outposts marked in red, and encrypted messages stamped with a seal he recognized instantly. It was the alien boss's personal crest. Daniel leaned back, stunned. If these files were real, it meant the boss wasn't just a wealthy corporate figure. He was funding and directing a war. And these shipments were going to worlds under protection treaties. That made it a direct violation of interstellar law. But that didn't explain why Lyra had given it to him. A soft sound pulled his attention back to the door. Footsteps echoed faintly, growing closer. Daniel quickly removed the chip, slipped it into his boot, and shut down the scanner. The door opened, and a tall alien guard stepped in. His yellow eyes scanned the room, then fixed on Daniel. "You have a visitor," the guard said in a cold voice. Daniel's heart jumped, wondering if it was Lyra again, but it wasn't. Another human stepped inside, one of the co-workers from the loading docks. He was older, with tired eyes and a nervous smile. "Hey, kid," the man said softly. "I heard what happened. You okay?" Daniel forced a calm expression, remembering Lyra's warning. "I'll be fine," he said. The man stepped closer. "Listen, I can talk to the right people. Maybe we can smooth this out, but you'll have to agree to certain terms." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "What kind of terms?" The man glanced at the guard, then leaned in slightly. "Sign a statement admitting you were at fault, say it was a misunderstanding, and they'll send you off-world. Quiet exile. Better than the alternative." Daniel felt his stomach twist. This was exactly what Lyra had warned about. Even humans here couldn't be trusted. He nodded slowly, pretending to think it over. "I'll consider it." When the man left, Daniel was alone again. His thoughts raced. The files on that chip could destroy the boss, maybe even save lives. But holding them also painted a target on his back. He didn't know if Lyra was telling the truth about her role in this, but she had risked coming to him in secret. That meant something. He sat in the dim blue light, staring at the door, knowing that every second brought him closer to dawn, and whatever fate awaited him. The hours in the cell passed slowly, each minute heavy with the sound of his own breathing. Daniel sat on the cold bench, trying to piece together everything. Lyra's warning, the crystal chip, and the strange offer from his human coworker. Nothing made sense, except one thing. He was in the middle of something much bigger than an accusation. The footsteps came before the door opened, the sound sharp and quick. This time it wasn't a guard or a human worker. It was Saren, the alien guard with scales as black as night and eyes that glowed faint yellow. Saron had always made it clear he didn't like humans. Daniel had seen the way he looked at him during work shifts, as if a human didn't belong in the same air as his kind. Saron stepped inside, the door closing behind him with a hiss. He studied Daniel for a long moment before speaking. "You're in trouble, human," he said, his deep voice like a growl. Trouble that will only end one of two ways, execution or exile. Daniel stayed quiet, watching him. Saren walked closer, his heavy boots thudding on the floor. "There's a way out," he continued. "Sign the confession. Admit to being with her. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. You'll be sent far away, off this station. You live, but you never come back." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Why are you offering me this? You don't even like me." A small smile curled on Saren's face. "Because your death will cause noise. The boss doesn't want noise right now, and I prefer my work without chaos." Daniel leaned back slightly, pretending to consider it. "And if I refuse?" Saren's smile faded. "Then you die here, quietly, before the sun rises." He turned to leave, but before stepping out, he added, "Think carefully, human. There are worse things than death." The door slid shut, locking again. Daniel sat still for a moment, then let out a slow breath. This wasn't a kindness from Saren. It was pressure. They wanted him gone, and they wanted it fast. But if he left now, he'd be walking away from whatever truth Lyra had risked to show him. The cell stayed quiet for a while, until the sound of the lock came again. The door opened, and Lyra slipped inside like a shadow. Her movements were quick and tense, and her eyes darted to the corners of the cell before settling on him. "They're going to push you to take exile," she said without wasting time. Daniel looked at her sharply. "I noticed. Saren was just here." She moved closer, lowering her voice to almost a whisper. "You can't take it. If you do, all of this will be for nothing." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "What exactly is all of this? Why am I in the middle of it?" She hesitated, then spoke. "My father isn't just a businessman. He's been moving weapons to warlords in violation of every treaty in the quadrant. These files," she tapped the boot where the chip was hidden, "are the proof. With them, I can bring him down. But if I try alone, I'll be silenced. I needed someone outside the family, someone the public wouldn't expect." Daniel stared at her. "So you made it look like I was with you. You dragged me into this on purpose." Her gaze didn't waver. "Yes, because without you, I have no chance. A human caught in a scandal with the boss's daughter, it's the perfect distraction. While they focus on the shame, we take the evidence to the broadcast tower and show the truth to the entire system." Daniel shook his head. "You're telling me you used me to start this, and now you want me to risk my life to finish it?" Lyra stepped closer, her voice firm. "I'm telling you that if we don't, thousands will die in the wars my father is fueling. And you will still die, whether you take exile or face execution, because no one leaves this station knowing what you already know." Her words sank in like cold water. She wasn't asking. She was telling him his choices were already gone. He rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of it. "And you're sure this will work? That if we get the files out, your father will fall?" A shadow passed over her face. "If the people see the truth, they will turn on him. But it has to be public. No courts, no secret councils. They're all bought." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "All right. But if we do this, we do it my way. No more surprises." Lyra gave the faintest nod. "Agreed. We move tonight. I'll come for you when it's time." She turned to go, but paused at the door. "And Daniel, don't trust anyone, not even the humans here. Some of them are already working for my father." The lock sealed behind her, leaving Daniel in the dim blue light again. His heart was pounding, not from fear this time, but from the weight of what he'd just agreed to. There was no turning back now. If they failed, Dawn would still bring his death. Only this time, it would be in the middle of a war he'd never wanted to be part of. The sound of the lock woke Daniel from the light, uneasy sleep he had fallen into. The cell door slid open just enough for a slim shadow to slip inside. It was Lyra. She was dressed in dark, tight-fitting clothes, her silver hair tied back and hidden under a hood. Her eyes moved quickly around the cell before settling on him. "It's time," she whispered. Daniel stood, rubbing the stiffness from his arms and legs. "What's the plan?" She didn't waste words. "We get to the archive room, take the final proof, and reach the broadcast station before they realize you're gone." She glanced toward the door. "The guards will notice within minutes. We move fast." She pulled a small device from her belt, pressed it against the door's control panel, and the cell lock clicked open without an alarm. Daniel followed her into the dimly lit corridor. The air was cool, and the faint hum of the station's systems surrounded them. Lyra led him to a narrow maintenance hatch in the wall. "This way," she said, opening it. Inside was a cramped tunnel lined with cables and pipes. It smelled faintly of oil and ozone. Daniel climbed in after her, the hatch closing behind them. The tunnel was tight, forcing them to crawl at times. Lyra moved with quick, practiced motions, barely making a sound. Daniel tried to keep his movements quiet, though the metal under his hands seemed to amplify every scrape. Somewhere above, muffled footsteps echoed. The patrols were nearby. At a junction, Lyra stopped suddenly and held up a hand, signaling him to stay still. Through a small grate ahead, Daniel could see 2 alien guards passing by in the corridor outside. Their voices were low, speaking in a language he couldn't understand, but the tone was serious. He held his breath until they were gone. They moved again, turning left, then right, navigating a maze of narrow passages. Daniel was beginning to understand how dangerous this was, not just because of the patrols, but because one wrong turn could leave them trapped in a dead end with nowhere to run. At one point, they reached a vertical shaft. A thin metal ladder ran along the side, leading up into darkness. Lyra climbed first, her movements quick and sure. Daniel followed, each rung cold beneath his hands. When they reached the top, Lyra carefully opened another hatch and peeked out. She motioned for him to stay low as they emerged into a dim service corridor. The hum of machinery was louder here, mixed with the faint vibration of heavy engines. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping condensation. Lyra led him toward a corner, then suddenly grabbed his arm and pulled him into a shadowed alcove. A patrol of 3 guards appeared at the far end of the corridor, their armor glinting in the low light. They walked slowly, scanning the area. Daniel could feel Lyra's breath close to his ear as they pressed against the wall, hidden in the darkness. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, every second feeling longer than the last. When the patrol finally passed, Lyra stepped back, her expression calm but alert. "We can't be seen. One alarm, and this is over." They continued, and Daniel began to notice the way she moved, always choosing the path with the most shadows, the most cover. She knew the station's hidden routes like someone who had spent years studying them. Eventually, they reached another hatch. Lyra pressed her ear against it, listening. Satisfied, she opened it and slipped inside, pulling him after her. They were now in a storage room filled with crates and equipment. The air was warmer here, smelling faintly of fuel. "This is our halfway point," she said. "From here, it's harder. The archive room is near the security hub. Too many eyes." Daniel frowned. "Then how do we get past?" She gave a small smile. "We give them something else to look at." From her belt, she took out a small cylindrical device and twisted the top. A faint hum began to build inside it. "This will trigger a false fire alarm 2 levels down. Every available guard will rush there." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And if some stay behind?" "Then we move faster than they do," she replied. She set the device on a crate, adjusted its settings, and stepped back. A small green light blinked, counting down. Lyra opened the far door, leading them into another corridor. This one was brighter, with security cameras along the walls. She moved close to the wall, keeping to blind spots, and Daniel did the same. Then it happened. Alarms blared, and the floor beneath them seemed to vibrate faintly. Through the walls, Daniel could hear the sound of multiple footsteps pounding away from their location. The diversion was working. "Now," Lyra urged, breaking into a run. They moved quickly through the empty corridor, every second precious. Daniel's legs burned, but adrenaline kept him going. At the next turn, Lyra stopped them short. A single guard remained, standing at the entrance to the archive sector. His back was to them, focused on a data pad. Lyra silently pulled a small blade from her belt and glanced at Daniel. He nodded, understanding. She moved like a shadow, striking fast. The guard barely made a sound before crumpling to the floor, unconscious. Daniel stepped forward to help her drag him out of sight. They slipped through the security door, now only a short distance from the archive room. Daniel could see the faint blue light spilling from the doorway ahead. Lyra glanced back at him, her eyes steady. "This is it," she said quietly. "Once we're inside, there's no going back." Daniel swallowed hard, his pulse racing. He didn't know what awaited them beyond that door, but he knew one thing for certain. They had crossed the point of no return. Whatever happened next would decide whether they lived to see another sunrise. The door to the archive room slid open with a soft hiss, and Daniel stepped inside behind Lyra. The air was cooler here, carrying the faint smell of old electronics. Tall shelves lined with glowing data cores stretched in perfect rows. Each one held decades of records, contracts, shipping manifests, security logs. Somewhere in here was the proof they needed to bring down her father. The room was quiet, except for the low hum of the servers. Lyra moved quickly, her fingers flying over a console near the back wall. "I'll start the search," she whispered. "Watch the door." Daniel positioned himself so he could see both the hallway and Lyra. His heart was still pounding from the run through the corridors. Every sound made him tense. The hum of the servers, the faint clink of metal as she pulled out data chips. Lyra's eyes were locked on the console screen. Symbols and codes scrolled past an alien script before translating into human-readable text. "Here," she said after a few moments, her voice sharp with urgency. "Weapons transfer orders, star maps, payment trails, all linked directly to my father's seal." Daniel stepped closer and saw the files. The information was damning. If released, no one could deny her father's guilt. "Copy everything," he said. She nodded and inserted a small storage drive. The console began transferring data, a progress bar creeping forward far too slowly for Daniel's comfort. Every second they stayed here increased the risk of being found. Then he heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and deliberate, not the rushing chaos of guards responding to an alarm. His grip on his belt tightened as the sound grew closer. The door opened, and Daniel's stomach sank. Saran stood there, his yellow eyes locking on him immediately. The guard stepped inside, his gaze sliding from Daniel to Lyra, then to the console where the data was still being copied. "I knew it," Saran said softly, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "You're stealing from him." Lyra's hand hovered over the console, ready to grab the drive. "Stay out of this, Saran," she said, her tone cold. He ignored her, focusing on Daniel. "You have two choices. Human, give me the evidence, and I'll let you walk out of here. Keep it, and I'll end you right here now." Daniel's mind raced. He didn't trust Saran, not for a second. Even if he handed over the files, there was no guarantee he'd survive. Beside him, Lyra's eyes flicked toward him, silently urging him to hold his ground. "Not happening," Daniel said finally, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. Saran's lips curled into something between a smile and a snarl. "Then you've chosen your death." The alien moved fast, lunging forward with surprising speed. Daniel barely dodged the first blow, feeling the rush of air as Saran's fist missed his face by inches. The second strike came at his ribs, but Daniel blocked with his forearm, the impact sending a jolt of pain up his arm. Lyra pulled the drive from the console and slipped it into her belt, moving out of the way to give Daniel room. Saran came at him again, this time aiming low. Daniel sidestepped, grabbing the alien's arm and using his momentum to slam him into the nearest data shelf. A few cores rattled and fell to the floor with sharp clinks. Saran recovered quickly, spinning around and grabbing Daniel by the collar. His grip was crushing, claws digging into the fabric and brushing against Daniel's skin. "Last chance," Saran hissed. "Hand it over." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You're not getting it." With a burst of strength, he shoved Saran backward. The alien stumbled, tapped his heel catching on the base of a shelf. Daniel seized the moment, swinging his elbow into Saran's jaw. The impact sent the guard crashing into the side of the console, knocking the wind out of him. Lyra was already moving toward the door. "We need to go," she called. Daniel backed toward her, keeping his eyes on Saran, who was struggling to get up. They slipped out into the hallway, and Lyra sealed the door behind them with a quick code on the panel. The hallway was eerily quiet, except for their footsteps. "He's going to raise the alarm," Daniel said. "Then we move before he can," Lyra replied without slowing down. They took a sharp turn, passing through another set of maintenance corridors. The air here was warmer, the walls lined with steam pipes. Daniel's muscles ached, but the adrenaline kept him moving. Behind them, a faint alarm began to sound. Saran had recovered and was alerting the others. Red lights flashed along the walls, bathing the corridor in a dim, pulsing glow. "Shortcut," Lyra said, pulling him toward a narrow side tunnel. It was barely wide enough for them to run through side by side. Their footsteps echoed off the metal walls, mixing with the distant shouts of guards. As they emerged into a larger passage, Daniel risked a glance back. Shadows moved quickly in the distance. Pursuers. "They're gaining," he warned. "Then we make them lose us," Lyra said, veering sharply left into another maintenance shaft. They climbed a short ladder and dropped into a darker hallway lined with closed doors. They finally slowed, both breathing hard. Lyra pressed her ear to one of the doors, then opened it to reveal an empty storage room. They slipped inside, shutting it quietly. For a moment, the only sound was their breathing. Lyra pulled the small drive from her belt and held it up. "We have it. Everything we need to expose him." Daniel nodded, his mind still racing from the fight. "Then we don't stop until it's out there for everyone to see." Her eyes met his, and for the first time since this began, she allowed herself the smallest smile. Agreed. Outside, the sound of guards running past the storage room door reminded them that this wasn't over, not even close. They left the storage room as soon as the hallway fell silent again. The red warning lights still flashed along the walls, but most of the guards had rushed in the opposite direction, following Saran's alert. Lyra led Daniel through a narrow passage that curved upward, each step taking them closer to the broadcast station. The air was hotter here, the hum of heavy machinery echoing around them. Pipes rattled above their heads as if the station itself was warning them to turn back. Daniel kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting to see armored figures rushing toward them at any moment. They reached a locked bulkhead door with a glowing red security panel. Lyra pulled out a small hacking tool from her belt and connected it to the panel. Sparks flickered, and the light turned green with a soft beep. "Go," she whispered. The door slid open to reveal a wide corridor with glass panels on one side, showing the view of deep space beyond. The stars stretched endlessly, a silent reminder of how far from safety they were. The other side of the corridor was lined with sealed doors leading to different control rooms. At the far end, Daniel could see the large double doors of the broadcast center. They started down the corridor, keeping low. Every step felt longer than it should, each second stretching out. Then a voice echoed from behind them. "Stop right there!" Daniel turned to see two guards sprinting toward them, weapons raised. Lyra didn't hesitate. She pulled a small smoke canister from her belt, twisted the cap, and threw it on the floor. Thick, dark smoke exploded around them, swallowing the corridor in seconds. "Run!" she shouted. They sprinted forward, the smoke hiding them from the guards, but also making it hard to see. Daniel's shoulder slammed into the wall once, pain jolting through him, but he kept moving. They reached the broadcast doors, and Lyra slammed her palm on the emergency override. The heavy doors groaned open just enough for them to slip inside before closing again. The broadcast station was a large, circular room filled with glowing control panels and massive screens. In the center stood a high-tech transmitter, its core glowing faint blue. Lyra ran to the main console, pulling out the data drive they had stolen from the archive. Daniel moved to the side entrance, locking it down so no one could get in easily. "How long will it take?" he asked, his eyes scanning the room for other exits. "Not long, if no one interrupts," Lyra said, her fingers flying across the controls. The screens around them lit up as the files began to upload. Images of weapons shipments, war maps, and transaction records filled the air like ghosts of her father's crimes. The hum of the transmitter grew louder, vibrating through the floor. "Once this signal goes live, it'll hit every public channel in the system," Lyra said. "No one will be able to cover it up." Daniel's heart pounded. "Then we just have to hold this room until it's done." They didn't have to wait long for trouble. The side door rattled violently, then a loud bang shook it. Voices shouted from outside, ordering them to open up. Daniel glanced at Lyra. She didn't look up, focused entirely on the upload. The door shook again, harder this time. Daniel grabbed a heavy metal bar from beside one of the consoles and wedged it into the door handles. The banging grew louder, more urgent. He could hear the faint whine of a cutting tool on the other side. 30 seconds, Lyra said, her voice tight. Daniel took a deep breath, positioning himself between the door and her. We can hold 30 seconds. The cutting sound turned into a bright flash as part of the door began to melt. The glow spread slowly, but it was enough to raise Daniel's pulse even higher. Outside, he heard Saren's voice bark an order, and the pounding resumed with new force. 10 seconds, Lyra shouted. Daniel gritted his teeth, bracing for the moment the door gave way. Then, with a sharp tone, the main console flashed green. Transmission complete, the computer's calm voice announced. On the screens, the final image of the alien boss's seal overlaid the war maps before fading to black. Lyra pulled the drive out and slipped it into her belt. We're done. Move. The melted section of the door gave way, and armed guards poured in. Daniel swung the metal bar, knocking one back before another rushed him. Lyra fired a small shock pistol, hitting another in the chest and sending him to the floor. They fought their way to the opposite exit, Daniel using the bar like a shield and weapon at the same time. Lyra kept moving, firing short bursts to keep the guards back. They burst into another hallway, the alarms now deafening. Behind them, Saren shouted orders, but they didn't stop. Lyra led them into a maintenance shaft, slamming the hatch closed and locking it from the inside. In the dark, narrow space, they finally stopped to catch their breath. Both were drenched in sweat, hearts still pounding. It's out there now, Lyra said between breaths. Every citizen, every council, every rival will see it. They can't hide it anymore. Daniel leaned back against the wall, still gripping the metal bar. Then we've just made ourselves the most wanted people on this station. She gave a small, almost defiant smile. Yes, which means we have to disappear before they find us. They moved again, crawling through the shaft toward the outer docking bays. Every sound from the corridors above reminded Daniel that the hunt had already begun. They had exposed the truth, but now survival would be the only thing that mattered. The maintenance shaft was long and narrow, lit only by faint strips of blue light that flickered every few seconds. Daniel followed Lyra through the tight space, his shoulders brushing against the metal walls. The air inside was warm and stale, carrying the faint smell of oil and dust. Somewhere far above, the muffled echo of running boots and shouted orders told him the guards were still searching. Lyra moved quickly, her hands and knees making almost no sound on the floor of the shaft. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, turning sharply at intersections and never hesitating. Daniel kept close behind, his mind racing with the weight of what had just happened. The files were out there now. The whole system would know the truth about her father. But that also meant they had destroyed one of the most powerful men in the quadrant, and that power would now be turned against them. After several minutes, they reached a hatch. Lyra paused and pressed her ear to it, listening for movement on the other side. Satisfied, she opened it carefully, and a rush of cooler air met them. Beyond the hatch was a dark storage bay, filled with crates and containers stacked high. They slipped out quietly, closing the hatch behind them. The bay smelled faintly of metal and something sweet, probably alien cargo. Daniel glanced at the markings on the crates, noticing that some were stamped with the insignia of her father's company. It made the moment feel heavier. This way, Lyra whispered, pointing toward a side door. They moved between the crates, keeping low. The only sound was the faint hum of the station's engines. As they approached the door, Daniel suddenly froze. A shadow moved near the far wall. From the darkness, Saren stepped forward, his yellow eyes locking on them. "You really thought you could run?" he said, his voice low but carrying across the room. His stance was calm, but there was a cold focus in his expression. Daniel instinctively shifted to put himself between Lyra and the guard. "You should walk away, Saren," he said. "It's over. The whole system knows the truth now." Saren's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You think truth matters? Your message will cause chaos, yes. But my loyalty is not to peace. It's to order, and that order begins with your deaths." Without warning, Saren drew a long, curved blade from his side. The light from above glinted off the sharp edge. Lyra reached for her shock pistol, but Saren's eyes flicked toward her, and she froze. "No," he said. "This is between me and him." Daniel could feel the tension vibrating in the air. His grip tightened on the metal bar he had carried since the broadcast room. Saren stepped closer, slow and deliberate. "You're just a human worker," the guard said. "You don't belong in our politics, our wars. And yet, here you are, thinking you've won." Daniel didn't answer. He kept his eyes on Saren's shoulders, waiting for the first move. It came fast. Saren lunged, the blade slicing through the air toward Daniel's side. Daniel twisted, the blade missing him by inches, and swung the bar in return. The impact rang out as metal hit metal, sparks flying. They circled each other, both breathing hard. Saren struck again, this time aiming for Daniel's chest. Daniel blocked with the bar, the shock of the hit numbing his arms. He stepped in close and slammed his shoulder into Saren, pushing him back into a crate. The alien recovered quickly, his movements faster than Daniel expected. A quick slash caught Daniel's sleeve, tearing the fabric and grazing his arm. Pain burned, but it only made him more determined. Lyra watched, tense but silent, clearly respecting the unspoken rule of this fight. Daniel feinted left, then swung from the right. The bar connected with Saren's side, and the alien grunted, stumbling. Daniel pressed the advantage, swinging again, forcing Saren back step by step until his heel caught on the edge of a crate. In that moment, Saren's expression changed. Not fear, but realization. "Maybe you are more dangerous than you look," he said quietly. But before Daniel could respond, Saren's blade slashed upward, catching the bar and sending it clattering across the floor. Now unarmed, Daniel had only seconds to react. Saren raised the blade for the final strike, but Lyra moved. In one swift motion, she fired her shock pistol, the bolt hitting Saren square in the chest. The alien convulsed, dropping the blade, and collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Daniel exhaled hard, the tension flooding out of him. "You said this was between me and him," he said, looking at Lyra. She holstered the pistol, her expression calm. "And you were winning, but I'm not risking your life for pride." They stepped over Saren's motionless body and reached the side door. Beyond it was a narrow service corridor leading toward the docking bays. The sound of alarms was still distant, but closer now than before. As they walked, Daniel finally spoke. "So why me, Lyra? Out of everyone, why choose me to be part of this?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced at him with an unreadable expression. "Because you're human. Because no one would expect you to be in the middle of this. And because I knew you wouldn't just walk away." Daniel frowned. "So you used me." She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "Yes, I used you, but I also saved you. If I hadn't pulled you into this, you'd still be working under my father, never knowing the truth about what he is. You'd still be powerless." Her words hung in the air for a moment. Daniel stared at her, searching her face for any sign of regret. There was none, only certainty. Finally, she turned away and started walking again. "The question now," she said over her shoulder, "is whether you want to disappear or you want to stay in the fight." They reached the docking bay, where a small, unmarked shuttle waited, its engines already warm. Daniel looked at the open ramp, then at Lyra. He didn't answer her question, but the way he stepped aboard told her everything she needed to know. The ramp closed, and the shuttle lifted off quietly, disappearing into the dark void of space. Behind them, the station still flashed with alarms, the chaos they had unleashed spreading through every channel. The truth was out, but their fight was far from over.